This month, January, marks the 487th anniversary of Spanish foundation of our great capital city, Lima. So I wanted to remember the figure of its founder, Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro. This book, Pizarro, the Marquis governor, was written by the eternal Peruvian historian José Antonio del Busto. The edition I have here in my hands is from 2011 by Empresa Editora el Comercio, and it has a very elegant hardcover and coated paper. This first volume was under the assessment of the famous historian Héctor López Martínez, who wrote the introduction, and there he highlights Del Busto's words that we can be supporters of the indigenous heritage or the Hispanic heritage, but above all, we should be Peruvians. The objective is neither to defend nor attack, but understand what occurred, to accept the facts. In 195 pages, 14 chapters, and an epilogue, this book also includes an impressive genealogy of the ancestors of Francisco Pizarro, going back as early as Theodemir, the king of the Ostrogoths, in the year 460. So we can trace back, the many ancestors until Gonzalo Pizarro y Rodríguez de Aguilar, who had a son called Francisco Pizarro, the conqueror of Peru and the founder of the City of Kings, Lima. The bibliography, as I said, is impressively long. Look at this, almost a page and a half, covering primary sources and secondary sources. The story begins, as it couldn't be in another way, in Trujillo de Extremadura, the city from which Pizarro came, on how at an early age he started being a soldier and abandoned his homeland for the New World, especially in Panama, the newly founded Panama City, in which he was one of the wealthiest neighbors. There he met Diego de Almagro and Hernando de Luque, and they start an enterprise. The enterprise that would lead him to conquer that mysterious golden kingdom that continues with the journeys, exploring disappointment, suffering, hunger, attacks by the Indians, but in the end they learned that a rich empire was suffering under a civil war, Huáscar versus Atahualpa. As Atahualpa becomes the winner, they get to arrange a meeting with him in the Andean city of Cajamarca. Atahualpa, who is very early convinced that they are not gods but mere men, decides to go to the square of Cajamarca, and he planned to make the Spanish captives, sacrifice or exterminate most of them. In the end, the story was the exact opposite. It continues with the foundation of cities like Jauja or the very city of kings, Lima, the rebellion led by Inca Prince Manco Inca, so serious that the city of Cusco was besieged for almost a year, and the newly founded city of Lima near the coast sent Spanish expeditions, but they were massacred, as I will say later. The story goes on with the civil war that had two factions, the Pizarro supporters and the Almagro supporters. Almagro dies first, is executed. Pizarro dies in the end in 1541. As well as the book itself, something that I really like about this particular edition is the material that supports, that accompanies the text. Timelines, maps, photos, articles by other authors, and images. For instance, pages 6 and 7 show us a timeline. Okay, what was happening in the world and in Peru between 1485 and 1541. Look at this photo of a monument erected in Trujillo, the homeland of Pizarro. There is a similar monument here in Lima, and some years ago there was controversy related to its removal from a position and be taken to a different one. The city of Trujillo, the very origin of that mestizo country that we are now. One of the most famous episodes prior to the conquest of Peru, on the Isla del Gallo, an island located in what is now Colombia, Governor Pedro de los Rios from Panama had ordered the Spaniards to go back there. But Pizarro uses his sword, he traces a line on the ground and he said, "To Panama to be poor, to Peru to become rich," and 13 Spaniards followed him. This canvas was painted by Juan Lepiani, and you can see it at the National Museum of Archaeology, Anthropology and History of Peru in Lima. I don't know why lately I have read plenty of nonsense and useless polemics that it was a genocide on the one hand, that the Spaniards saved us on the other, that the Spaniards were bad, that the Indians were good, and vice versa. Well, of course, millions of indigenous people died, but rather than the sword, the iron, and gunpowder, it was the many illnesses, the viruses that they brought, for which the indigenous population of the continent was not immune. Anyway, the first civil war that affected that period, Huáscar versus Atahualpa. Huáscar, the heir of Huayna Cápac, and Atahualpa, a formidable warrior supported by the north, Quito, while Huáscar was supported by the imperial capital, Cusco. The square of Cajamarca, the many people who accompanied Atahualpa, and they supposed they were going to capture the Spaniards, but on the contrary, it was the Spaniards who killed all of them and captured Atahualpa. This is another canvas by Juan Lepiani, located at the Museum of Art in Lima. Look at this impressive infographic. The proportion of the Spanish army versus the indigenous army, where Atahualpa was, here in blue, Francisco Pizarro, in pink, the priest Vicente de Valverde on the left, the many Indians, the tactics that had been taken into account so as to capture Atahualpa in November 1532. The pictures of famous Inca chronicler Felipe Huamaponma de Ayala couldn't be absent in this book. Even though he drew Atahualpa as being kept with chains, that was not true according to José Antonio del Busto. But he was treated with respect while he was held as hostage. Perhaps the most important painting of Republican Peru, the funerals of Inca Atahualpa. After Atahualpa being executed, there was a Catholic ceremony, and the many wives and concubines of Atahualpa break into the place and they demanded to be buried with him. The magnificent imperial capital of Cusco, you can see the Inca walls that fascinate Peruvians and foreigners. The foundation of Lima on the 18th of January 1535, this is a picture by José Effio, located at the National Museum of Archaeology, Anthropology and History of Peru. You can see a picture of Lima in the 19th century, the glorious capital of Peru. An article on the Incas of Vilcabamba, because some people, especially foreigners, tend to believe that everything ended in 1532, and that is not true. An Inca prince, Manco Inca, who was crowned as Inca emperor by Pizarro, soon noticed that he was a mere puppet, humiliated, tortured, so he escaped and led a rebellion. Here you can see a picture of Manco Inca, one of our heroes, and he had the support of different generals, for example Titu Yupanqui or Kisu Yupanqui, who massacred 4 whole Spanish expeditions sent from Lima to defend the Spaniards who were besieged in Cusco. That is something that not many people know. Frequently on the internet I read that how fewer than 200 Spaniards conquered an empire in such a short time, and that is not true. More than 200 Spaniards who were sent in 4 expeditions were killed by the men of Yupanqui. The civil wars between the supporters of Almagro and the supporters of Pizarro, both parties claimed to be the owners of the ancient Inca capital. And of course, the very death of Francisco Pizarro, assassinated by the supporters of Almagro in his house in Lima on the 26th of June 1541. José Antonio del Busto shows a great mixture between, academic writing on the one hand, based on sources which reconstructed the life of a man, a son of his time, neither monster nor an angel, as Mr. del Busto himself says on page 188. He said that he was a man who was strong, sober, courageous, ruthless at times. The author criticizes 2 actions that he committed: killing women in order to punish men. 2 Inca princesses were killed in that way. On the other hand, he was also preoccupied by the indigenous people's welfare, a lesser ambition than his brothers, and that insecurity that he had as a governor because he was just a soldier, illiterate, neither good at numbers nor maths, but he was surrounded by capable men. He was a father of 4 mestizo children, and above all he was a soldier, a warrior. Wasn't he as conquistador as Hernán Cortés, or the Inca emperors Pachacútec, Tupac Yupanqui, or Huayna Cápac, or Atahualpa himself? There were just 2 options. He was about to defeat Atahualpa or vice versa. And wasn't it Atahualpa himself who stated that in war you can either defeat or be defeated? This is a really recommendable book. Mixes historical precision and literary style in a way that is archaic. It's really elegant. You feel as if you are reading one of those chronicles or a historical novel rather than just a history book. This is a book that speaks to us in a language of feat and glory, neither Hispanist nor indigenous, but Peruvian or Peruvianist, let's say. Bye bye.